So last summer, Rose and I were out shopping, and it was really hot. We were in the Twin Cities, and it was just warm. And so we decided to go to a coffee shop and get an iced coffee. And we were sitting in this coffee shop and noticed, I just started doing research on the whole like attention economy thing, and just started getting introduced to this material. And just right across, we got our coffee and sat down. Right across from us, there was a guy with a virtual reality headset on. And he had earplugs in, and it was clear that he was working. He was kind of waving his hands, and things must have been happening in here by his waving of his fingers, and he was typing, and he was talking to somebody on the phone, and he was just doing all this stuff. And Rose and I just looked at him, and we looked at each other, and it just was one of those moments where you kind of got this sense like, we've crossed a threshold. We've entered into something new. This is just kind of odd. The world is different now. Because this guy clearly didn't want to be pestered, eyes and ears covered. He clearly wanted to get a lot done because he was working feverishly. And yet he was in a coffee shop. Like, there are better places to go to get work done than a coffee shop. And to me, it just seemed to show exactly where we are as a society. We have both things going. I think every generation, it's been shown that each and every generation, people are becoming less socially engaged, less engaged with each other, more afraid to engage person to person. And so we have this confusion because responding to our instincts and actually even leading them sometimes, we have devices and technology that make us less and less likely to connect with other people until we're looking like this. And yet, I mean, if the guy really wanted to get work done, why are you at a Dunkin' Donuts, right? And so we have these conflicting realities happening here that is confusing us. We so desperately want to be isolated in some ways, and yet we know that to be torture. I mean, if you've studied like how they handle prisoners, solitary confinement is the worst form of torture you can give someone. And yet we are becoming more and more isolated, and that goes against the grain because we all have and are hardwired to be social. So this guy was the perfect example. He was so in his own little world, but he needed to be around people. And it's that confusion that is the reality of where we are in these days. Again, studies have shown the brokenness. We are alienated from one another. We are alienated from God, which I think is the most basic of our needs. But studies have even shown that we are now more alienated even from ourselves, because the time that we usually would spend in reflection and deep thought are now filled with games and entertainment right at our hands. And so we have this brokenness, this disconnect, this alienation, this confusion that we feel of never really being in touch with the things that we're supposed to be in touch with, others, God, and ourselves. And it's literally killing us. Well, it's always been this way. And this has always been how the world has been. And so our text points to that. And I really want to invite and encourage you to open up to page 2 in the Pew Bible, because this is a text that is worthy of our deep dive. Now, if you grew up in church, you'll know that there are 2 creation stories in the Bible. There are the 7 days, and then there is the Adam and Eve. And the 7 days story you probably are more familiar with, or certainly understand better, because that was a part of the common lectionary. So for those churches, most churches in our childhood, they had the schedule of readings that come around, and that text of the 7 days was in that schedule of readings. This one was not. And yet this text has impacted our culture without ever really having been regularly reviewed or studied. And that's been kind of a problem, because this story is super confusing and we are confused about it. Essentially, culturally, we think of our lot in life, in part because of the story, as one of crime and punishment. We mess up. Adam and Eve messed up and they got tossed. And then we kind of go, well, we are like them, so we mess up and we toss. So they messed up, they got tossed. I mess up, I get tossed. We all mess up, we all get tossed. Isn't that good news? That's the message of the story. It's not very helpful to us, right? The story itself is confusing because God says, don't you eat that fruit, don't you even touch it or you'll die. And the serpent says, hey, it's fine. You can touch it, you'll eat it, you'll be fine. Matter of fact, it'll make you smarter. Who was right? The serpent. She touched it, she ate it, and she got smarter. Right? And so the story in and of itself is confusing. So again, we know this to be a story. We know it's not the history of the creation of the world. We know that it's an allegory, but what does the allegory mean? If the allegory is not about crime and punishment, what is it about? Well, as the painting showed, and as I tried to explain to the kids, it's this getting tossed. It's this brokenness. It's this alienation from God. It's kind of replacing good stuff with bad stuff. That's really the problem. Added to the problem with this story is the kind of misogynistic overtone that's in this story that then has creeped in and dominated our culture, in part because of this text. It's terrible. Like the main man, and that is kind of how we have structured our society. The man is main. The main man has a helper. She messes up. She tricks him into doing it. And like most every man, he goes, oh, I didn't do it. Right? And that's been our cultural construct and norm forever, mostly based on the story. And so even this misogynistic overtone is not at all what the story sought to create or sought to do. So again, this whole thing is about seemingly you mess up, he gets up packing. Well, we need to do better biblical research. The verse, chapter 3, verse 1, starts off with, now the serpent was more crafty than any other wild animal. The word crafty is actually the Hebrew word of arum, and it has its own specific definition. Later, after Adam and Eve eat, it's the first time it dawns on them, they're naked. Believe it or not, that's the same word, arum. This is a different tense. And it's all based on the root word of aram, which is kind of to make bare, kind of to reveal, kind of to be bald-faced, if you will. and what the text is saying is that the snake is more of that than the people. The snake's craftier, bolder, more bald-faced, more revealing. There's a great biblical scholar named Judith Glambush who is from the College of William and Mary. She's a biblical scholar. She uses the definition of this word as beguile. That they're beguiled. The snake is beguiling. And I love that word. You know, I'm kind of a word nerd anyway, but the word guile is bad stuff, and beguiled is to be drawn to the bad, to be kind of sucked in. If someone's beguiling, they draw you to them and not favorably. And so, beguiling, that the snake is just more beguiling than even the people are. So it's not that everything was perfect and then they messed up and it became imperfect. It's levels of attraction, devolution that turn into alienation. That's really the point of the story. If you look up the word beguile in Merriam-Webster's dictionary, I love it. There's a secondary definition, which is to divert. And that is exactly where we are as a culture. We are beguiled because we are so darn diverted. This story of our lives, the story from Genesis, is not about crime and punishment. It's not about snakes or trees. It's not about being in the good place or being in the bad place. It is about being lured, diverted, and distracted, and replacing the best things in our lives with other stuff, even good stuff. And we can feel that. It's palpable. We sense it. Everybody that I know is like, I'm just, And it's so hard. Which is why I think we've chosen out of our love and care for you, to have this very difficult conversation with you over these weeks. Because we're all beguiled, we're all overwhelmed, we're all run down, we're all frustrated, because we're all diverted and distracted, and we're replacing the best things in our lives, knowing ourselves, knowing God, and knowing others. We're replacing those things with other things. And it's not just the stuff that comes through your phone, but it could be anything. It could be youth sports. It could be, whatever you're into. We're replacing the best of things with other things. And it's killing us. It's literally killing us. And again, problem is not new. The thing that I love about this book, Siren's Call, now it's not a religious book. It has its own partisan nature for sure. But Chris Hayes in this book gives us the history of why we have been so distracted and why we are being more distracted, and how we need to steward our attention now more than ever. And some of the examples he uses, I think, are just so pertinent. Did you know that the first mailed advertisement, the first mailed circular ad, was in 1917, and it was for Vicks VapoRub? How many of you remember Vicks VapoRub? It was for Vicks VapoRub. And because the post office in those days was hard up for pieces of mail, they actually said, well, if you're going to send all of these mailings in bulk, we'll give you a bulk rate. And the first piece of junk mail was mailed in 1917. In 2025, the U.S. Postal Service estimates that for every one good piece of mail that you get, you receive 18 pieces of junk mail. I can tell by the look on your face that squares with you. I mean, the ecological impact on that, we could just go on and on. It's terrible. And then that doesn't even include, and then the invention of spam email, and then robotext. I actually got a robotext offering me that I could work from home in between services. And so the number of emails, texts, robocalls, it costs them nothing to send all that stuff. But you want to know what the cost is on society? This year, based on this trajectory, is $20 billion lost on scams. Mostly targeting our vulnerable seniors. $20 billion lost. You can say no to 10,000 robo-texts, and you respond to one, and you can lose everything, right? $20 billion lost. It's terrible. Because it's all so overwhelming. It's also all so beguiling. And it diverts us. And it's just too much. So we get overwhelmed and confused. All of this reminds me of some of the greatest theology in music history. And it comes from a source that you probably are going to be surprised by and maybe not even happy with. But it's from Mick Jagger. Mick Jagger in 1967 wrote a song. And that song was based on actually a French novel, a classic French novel. And it's a song that takes you through history. And he said, when I wrote that song, he said, we were just, a bunch of innocent kids doing music from England. After he wrote that song was so impactful societally. In a ripe time, the late 60s, that band was then suddenly accused of being part of the occult. And that he was actually spoken of to be the devil himself. And if you don't believe that to be true, listen to Bye Bye Miss American Pie. You guys know that song. There's a whole verse in that song dedicated to Mick Jagger being on stage as the devil. It didn't really hurt his career, by the way, but it was hard because he went from being an innocent kid to being accused of something that he wasn't. But the song, which is called Sympathy for the Devil, goes through the course of history. Think Forrest Gump. It goes through the course of history from Jesus all the way to the killing of the Kennedys, and it tells the story of history told from a first-person perspective of the devil. Again, based on French literature. And then what gets asked over and over in the song is, pleased to meet you, won't you guess my name? But then right after that is some of the greatest theology ever. Because he says, it's what's confusing you. That's the nature of my game. We have misinterpreted the story of the fall as being about crime and punishment, about not being good enough, about sinning and getting tossed. And from the devil's point of view, it's not about right beliefs or wrong beliefs or right perspectives or wrong perspectives. It's not about making a mistake and messing up, which we all do. The devil's work is confusing and beguiling and diverting and distracting you. It is about taking you away from everything that you should be focusing on and focusing on all the wrong things. That's where alienation comes from. I will leave you with an example that Chris Hayes uses in the book, which I think is just profound. He talks about Steve Jobs. And he has interviewed Steve Jobs' main creator with him was a guy named John Ivey. And John Ivey said that Steve Jobs was the most focused man he ever known. And that Steve Jobs kept going to Ivey saying, what are you letting go of? What are you saying no to? What are you saying no to? What are you saying no to? You can't just say no to the things that are bad ideas. You have to actually sacrifice some of the good things that you have, to really focus. You have to focus on the right things. Again, this great quote. People think focus means saying yes to the thing that you've got to focus on, but that's not what it means at all. It means saying no to the hundreds of other good ideas that are there. You have to pick carefully. And the irony, my friends, is that Steve Jobs, the man who was behind the invention of the iPhone, the most beguiling, diverting, and distracting device ever created, was himself never a victim of the device he created. We live in confusing, beguiling, and sinful times. What are you willing to say no to? Even good and important things, even things that you like. Wordle. What are you going to say no to so that you can say yes to keeping the right things, the best things, knowing others, knowing God, and knowing yourself? Focus on the love of God, and may it be in and through you.